This Week in Startups is brought to you by Design Crowd. Best custom graphic, logo, and web designs for your business. Get $100 off your design project at designcrowd.com/twist or enter promo code TWIST. And Braintree. Qualify for PCI compliance and protect your customers from cyber threats and your business from security breaches. Visit braintreepayments.com/twist.
Hey everybody, welcome to This Week in Startups. I'm your host, Jason Calacanis, and boy, do we have a great lineup today. Jessica Lessin is with us from TheInformation. If you don't know TheInformation, it is a paid publication on email. That's absolutely fantastic. She has real high-quality journalists doing random acts of journalism all day long. It's amazing. Welcome back to the program. Jason. Things are going great for you. And Nellie Bowles is back on the program. She is also from an exceptional publication, The Guardian, which also does random acts of actual real journalism all day long. Ladies, welcome back to the program.
It's good to be here.
We know why we're here. Peter Thiel versus Gawker has been the most...
Is this still going on? What is it? We're at like round 7,000.
It does feel like that.
Yeah.
But it does feel like, to me, having been around the block here, that this is the most divisive fight I've ever seen in the history of Silicon Valley, at least since the 90s. I don't know what happened in the 80s with Jobs versus, Bill Gates, but Peter Thiel versus Gawker is really polarizing. Why do you think that is, Jessica? Why is this such a polarizing topic before we get into everybody's
My honest to God answer is that the media has gone into sensationalist mode of sensationalizing everything. God. So I do think that there are core issues at stake in this debate, but I think there are core issues at stake in a lot of what's going on in our country.
Yeah.
And I think that the treatment that this has gotten in a lot of the coverage actually is, like all media coverage, being skewed towards... Hold on one second, Nellie. I don't think that... I'm happy to talk about the issues at stake.
Right.
But to talk about why it's the most
so big. We'll start with why it's so big.
Right, why it's so big.
So you think that it's been inflated...
Yes, absolutely.
By the media. Nellie, you're shaking your head.
Billionaires secretly funding one of the biggest lawsuits of the year.
Billionaires secretly fund stuff all the time.
It's a huge, crazy story.
Yes.
The media doesn't need to sensationalize this. Fiction couldn't do this. This is crazy. The reality is wild enough. I don't think it's being sensationalized at all.
For people who don't know the story, I'm just going to give a little basic recap here. Peter Thiel, for those of you who don't know, is a billionaire here in Silicon Valley who is quixotic in his views on life. He went to Stanford. He wrote a lot of stuff about the diversity. He wrote a book, The Diversity Myth, and he made a ton of money off of PayPal and then a bunch of money backing Facebook. He's on the board of Facebook, and he was outed by a publication in New York, Gawker, run by Nick Denton, who himself was a quietly closeted gay man in New York. A third gay man wrote the story that outed Peter Thiel, named Owen Thomas, who ran Valleywag, which was known for doing, really, I would say, as hard as you can be personally on people in their reporting. I was kind of one of their whipping boys for a little while there too. We'll get into that. I put myself up there. And Peter Thiel has done the longest end game of any vendetta in the history of vendettas, it seems. We'll see what happens on the final episode of Game of Thrones, but this is Game of Thrones-esque in its execution. He backed the lawsuit that Hulk Hogan had against Gawker. Gawker, of course, published a sex tape in 2012 with Hogan having sex with his friend Bubba the Love Sponge, his wife. I can't make this stuff up. And the sex tape was stolen by one of Bubba's people. Gawker never one to turn down an opportunity like this, publish the sex tape, and they lost a $150 million judgment, which was funded by Peter Thiel with the explicit purpose of inflicting as much pain on Nick Denton. So what does this...
And it emerges that he's funding several other lawsuits.
Against Gawker.
Yeah.
He's got 3 lawsuits, it seems.
But a judge decided the case, right?
Right. So let's go to the case for a second.
Peter didn't, attack the First Amendment, right? Or Peter, he funded a lawsuit. He should have been upfront about it. I completely agree.
Okay.
You do no favors to anyone
If he's
by
going to
doing
call it philanthropy, his greatest act of philanthropy,
Which
and then
was
he's
a
doing
quote
it
he
hidden
said.
away. He said
You
it's his
should
greatest
be
act of philanthropy.
upfront. Be upfront about it, right?
I think we all agree he should be upfront about it.
If Florida judge decided this case, right?
Right. Or jury, too.
And a jury, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
So, I think like all this, attacks on the First Amendment at state, I mean, I believe deeply in the First Amendment. I also believe in libel law. I believe in defamation law. And I believe that the courts decide that, right? Which is fundamentally the process that has happened here.
Nellie, if
It's legal. What he's doing is legal.
right,
Yeah.
So
he's allowed to do
find
this.
it?
It is.
You find it offensive? You find it repulsive? You find it should be banned? Should it be banned in your mind?
He is doing something legal.
Okay.
I don't think you can argue against that. But like what Bezos said at the Code Conference last week was, if we don't follow the spirit and the cultural norms of the Constitution and of what like our founding fathers laid out in terms of freedom of speech and what they wanted,
Yep.
if we try as Thiel's doing to sort of like weave around those, then the Constitution is just a piece of
don't think
paper.
he's
I think what
weaving
he's doing
around
is
it.
un-American. I think
Really?
that it is not following the principles that our country is built on, and now, especially now,
So no one can ever sue a media
we
company?
need an aggressive press. Of course you can. Of course. and
Okay,
this is
so
legal.
how is what he's do? I mean, if the spirit, we agree it's legal, you think it's like anti-American, right? And so then the question is,
He's
like,
trying
should
to
media
intimidate
organizations?
he's trying to intimidate reporters, and he's calling Gawker.
Well, intimidate report. I mean, he's bringing cases. He's helping to bring cases, right? Maybe he's doing other things I don't know about that are intimidating.
Well, let's talk about what we know.
Yeah,
which is
but what we
there's two or
know,
three
right?
cases that he's
So
backed.
I think, as a founder and owner of a media organization, I think we should be.
TheInformation.com, yeah.
Thank you, Jason. We should be held to account, and I think that those laws are very important. And so I don't think it's un-American to back a lawsuit against a publication that you think crossed a line and maybe did something un-American too, right? That's
Nellie,
a
is your-
fundamental thing.
Certainly, it's legal. Yeah.
Is your fear that Peter Thiel or other billionaires are now going to go and anytime they get any kind of coverage, individually sue and go against publications?
I think this is a really scary precedent.
Okay.
And I think that, like what you said, the division that it brought between tech and press, it's a super scary precedent.
For journalists. Because I can tell you, for the people who are on the side of the lies, and Gawker has legitimately lied and printed false information. I know this because I sent them a false story, which they printed hours after I sent it to them. This is a true story. I heard that they were trying to figure out what my next project was when I was doing Mahalo. I had also bought the domain name Kukua, which means to help in Hawaiian. So I sent an email to them, and I said, "Dear Valleywag, and I wrote it in front of my team. I said, watch this. And my team was like giving me punch-ups as we did it. I did it from a Yahoo account. I said, Dear Gawker, Valleywag, I just sat through an hour-long interview with Jason Calacanis, who is the biggest narcissist I've ever met in my life. I wrote this myself. Listen, to their own self be true.
You're kidding.
I'm not kidding. This is a true story. And
No,
then I said,
giddy, but-
what's that?
I said giddy, not kidding.
Yeah, I'm so giddy about it. So then I wrote, he spoke about himself for 55 minutes of a 60-minute interview. Then he asked me 2 questions about myself and left the room after being 15 minutes late. And his new project is he's hiring Don Imus, and he's building a network of podcasts. And Don Imus had just been fired for saying some racist, insane stuff, and they printed it immediately. And then I busted them on it, and then they changed the story a bit. So they would print anything. Nellie, let me ask you.
The Times has been tricked by people on the phone before.
Okay, but let me ask you a question. Do you think, on a journalistic basis, that we should have publications that print anything that come into the tip line without doing any fact-checking?
No, obviously not.
Okay, so I'm asking it obviously as a rhetorical question in a way.
Obviously, we ought
And
to
do you
have
think people
standards.
should be able to sue them?
Obviously, they should be allowed to sue for libel. All of these things are legal.
Okay.
All
So
of these things-
what is it that Peter's done that's un-American? What was that
when
line he
you
crossed?
start defining journalism around things that you like and things that are good, and then start saying that everything outside
But
of
we
that,
don't know that Peter
Vinod
didn't
Kosa,
like
okay, Kosa, in his tweets about this, then he calls Gawker clickbait, and then goes on to call the New York Times clickbait. So these are very fuzzy lines.
Yeah,
Obviously,
I
you should be
agree
able to sue
with-
for
look,
libel.
I agree
Like,
with your point
and
that
Denton
people have-
himself said you should be able to sue for libel. You should be able to sue. That's not.
Everyone's assuming that Peter's done this because he was miffed by one thing, right? Peter Thiel is a smart man. He is a thoughtful man. He's a complicated man, right? He's got more agendas and more reasons for doing things than, you can imagine, right?
Right.
So what we know are his actions, right? And what he said, that he's funded this thing in this lawsuit. Now, you're talking about billionaires having thin skins and hating the articles we write that are negative. That's true. That's annoying, right?
Right.
But it's also not quite this issue.
So how do
We're
you-
Our conversation right now is a moral conversation about whether this is right or wrong, not whether this is legal or illegal.
But what's right or wrong? Vinod Khosla being miffed when someone writes a negative article, or Peter
systematically suing reporters who write negative stories and funding lawsuits that wouldn't exist otherwise.
Seems to me we're trying to figure out
There's no
if-
publication in the world who could survive that. If Thiel went after any
Well, the New York
basically any
Times
other-
could.
Yeah, probably.
Washington
because of
Post
the
could.
Again, he's not
well, because
going
of
after
Bezos.
every publication, right? I mean, this is a specific lawsuit that has specific merits that have been decided by a jury, right?
And that publication is Gawker, which doesn't have the
Right into the microphone.
Everyone in that publication is Gawker, which everyone loves to hate, and which everyone likes to say isn't journalism, which I think is a very, very dangerous line to start to
Is one
tread.
of the issues here that how Gawker behaved in its early years is different than how it behaved in its latter years, and that maybe they evolved a bit as a publication. So you have Gawker 2016 doing, you have some great writers who came out of the Gawker, sort of family. Hundreds of people have obviously written for that collection of publications. So it's sort of like saying, my God, the whole News Corp empire, which includes Wall Street Journal, which also includes, the New York Post, like this is a very large media organization, and you could have a lot of great things occurring there, but you could also have lies and really bad stuff going on there. Gawker's a complicated target, isn't it?
And it has a very complicated and charismatic and eloquent leader
Nick Denton,
right? Who I think is incredibly intelligent. I think makes excellent points about certain things. I think also holds up parts of Gawker and doesn't talk about other parts.
Well,
He's
I think
a salesman and
sort of my
showman like
point.
everyone else.
Their response to it was like, here's all the great stuff we've done.
Right.
But they left
it was
off
just
that
last
list.
year, right,
Yeah.
that they had to retract that horrendous story,
About the CFO of Condé.
which caused
I guess
the brother of the. I don't remember exact details, but it caused a number of people to leave, and
I guess I
actually
would be able to
changed their
talk
mind.
about. Would it be as a? Yeah, no, it'd be okay for me to talk about the details of that case because it was out there and talked about.
You could, but they now are saying they wish they never had published it, right?
Right. So anyway, the CFO of a media company,
and Denton has said as much.
Right.
But then I could come back and say, okay, well, they've also had legitimate scoops. Rob Ford, the Toronto mayor.
I just still don't
scooped
understand
that
what the
Facebook
moral issue
trending.
here
So,
is.
of course, I could come back and say that, but the fact is, we shouldn't be trying to weigh whether a publication is good or not, and whether they do enough good journalism to deserve the First Amendment. But at the Code Conference, everyone was talking about Gawker's not journalism; they don't deserve it.
I think that's besides the point, but I still don't see the moral line Peter Thiel has crossed by funding a lawsuit against a specific case where he thinks any news organization was wrong to publish the information.
I think by tweaking it so that it specifically, that insurance couldn't kick in, that he knows it's just going to individually hit the journalist, and then by funding multiples against reporters,
Nellie.
I think that he is trying to scare reporters.
Yeah,
and
that was
this
definitely
is
an
not a time when
intimidation
we can be
tactic.
scaring reporters.
So explain that exactly what he did for the audience that doesn't know.
What he did, he's not just doing a normal lawsuit.
Right.
And one of the things that tipped Denton off to why he thought there was someone backing it is because in Hulk Hogan's case, there was, I'm going to mess up the details, but there was some clause that triggered insurance, and if removed, then all of a sudden all the liability fell on Denton and Gawker, and insurance wouldn't cover
And AJ,
it.
the
And AJ,
journalist
so
as
insurance
well.
But
wouldn't
not
cover
just
it.
the journalist, right? Also the
And
publication.
so-
Yes,
So
but
it's
he
not
basically
solely targeted
crafted
journalists.
the
He
lawsuit.
crafted it so that you
It would inflict personal
Yes.
damage on the
and give him
journalist
less
and the
money.
publisher.
Get a smaller.
A smaller judgment, but force the publication and the individuals to pay, not
Yeah.
the insurance company.
So it was personal. It was
Which is
meant
an
to hurt
intimidation
reporters.
tactic, which-
and Denton's now had to move out of his house, and he's renting.
He has?
Well, but
Yeah,
Denton,
that's glorious.
Denton isn't
That's
just
glorious.
the reporter in this case.
I think that's great comeuppance, honestly, because if you think about the things Gawker did in those early days, it was very personal, and there was a major vendetta. Nick Denton was trying to do
What
harm
we're
to people.
illustrating here is it's all personal, right? You're on one side
Yeah,
until
this
you
is
hit
all-
Gawker, and then you're on the other
No,
side. Right?
I can appreciate many of the writers from Gawker. Listen, I stole Peter Rojas from there, and
And you guys
Elizabeth
obviously have
and
personal
Lockhart Steele.
feelings about Gawker. Like you guys have both been
Absolutely.
written about on Gawker.
And when we get back
so
from
are
this
angry
commercial
at
break, I'm going to
Gawker.
bring that up. I'm going to talk about the specific stories they wrote about us and why, blah, 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 blah. And also, a little teaser for after the commercial break. I'm going to talk about the outing of gay men and how that really, I'm going to heterosplain as a cis white.
I'm going to out you right now.
Male. Don't do it. Don't do it. Jade will be crestfallen if you out me right now when we get back on This Week in Startups. Hey, everybody, we've got a great new partner on This Week in Startups, and I'm really excited about because it's a product that we're using here at This Week in Startups and launch, and it's called Design Crowd. You can go ahead and check it out at designcrowd.com and on Twitter at DesignCrowd. What is it? It is the best way to make a logo, a graphics, or web design for your business. It's an online marketplace where you can outsource or crowdsource, as you know, custom designs, and they have over 500,000 designers there around the world. Here's how it works. Very simple. You post a brief. What is a brief? It's basically like your spec. I'm looking for a logo for This Week in Startups. It's a podcast with a bombastic, aggressive, Brooklyn-born bulldog of a host, Jason Calacanis, but it's about technology and finance. And then you get feedback from 50 to 100 designers, sometimes even more. And then you give them feedback. So you look at the 50 or 100 designers' work and you say, you know what? These three speak to me. I like the bulldog logo. We used to have a bulldog logo in This Week in Startups. Yeah, let's play off the bulldog. And then I like this other person who's doing the skyline of New York and the skyline of San Francisco. Oh, that tells the story of Jason going from New York to San Francisco. Great. You give them that feedback. It motivates the designers. They give you more. And then you select the best one and you approve payment to that designer. It's a money-back guarantee. There are designers all over the world who love working on this type of platform, and their clients include the Harvard Business School, Forum for Innovation and Growth, Virgin, HTC, Absolute Vodka, Amnesty International, which was my first job out of school. I worked at Amnesty International as a microcomputer specialist, and 100,000 plus small businesses and entrepreneurs. Visit designcrowd.com/twist, and they will give you up to $100 on your next design project. Go ahead and visit designcrowd.com/twist and save up to $100 on your design project. And for the super fans, special mission, go ahead and thank @DesignCrowd on Twitter and Facebook, and I will like it and retweet it from our different accounts. Great way to engage and reward the partners who make independent media like This Week in Startups possible. Thanks again to our new partner, Design Crowd. Go ahead and try it. It's really good. Okay, let's get back to this amazing episode. Hey, everybody. It's This Week in Startups. I'm your host, @Jason Calacanis, or just @Jason, actually, and what a lineup I have today. Two of the brightest minds in the technology space. Jessica Lessin is with us. You can follow her on the Twitter, Jessica Lessin. She is the founder and editor-in-chief of TheInformation, and The Information is available exclusively to This Week in Startups listeners for, what's the deal? If they use the code TWIST, what?
Email us at hello@theinformation.com.
Okay, hello at TheInformation. Twist.
Jason loves Gawker in the subject line.
Perfect. All right, easy
or
to do.
Or anything else. And
anything
we will
else.
give you 50% off your first 3 months. So,
Perfect.
We'd love to have people. And we would just also want to give a big shout out to all our subscribers who are listening to this. We're grateful to have you as part of the community. So
yeah, you're doing
excited
great.
to grow
it. The publication is great. You had a lot of big stories. We'll get into them later in the second half of the show. And Nellie Bowles, of course, is a staff writer for The Guardian. But I saw a little note that your career, the ascension of Nellie Bowles, continues here in Silicon Valley from the San Francisco Chronicle. Like, what were you doing? San Francisco Chronicle.
The style section. It's
She
okay.
covered our launch
She was like
party.
the style section.
I covered
in San
Jessica's
Francisco.
launch party.
And then all of a sudden,
It was a great party.
Great
she
art.
starts ping-ponging her way from publication to publication. Now the latest on her list, a correspondent for HBO's new show from Vice. What is this new nightly show? And what are you going to be doing for Vice? Let's get a plug in.
Fun. It starts in the fall. I don't know. I should know more details about like what it's going to be called and things, but
you'll do tech.
I'll do tech. Yeah. I'll be the Silicon Valley correspondent.
For Vice.
Packages for Vice. It's
from
going to be fantastic.
Silicon Valley. You'd be like our Anthony Bourdain. Or actually,
Game of Thrones, Nellie Bowles.
It's going to be really fun.
The Khaleesi over here. All right, listen, we're talking about the Thiel versus Gawker case, which is the most, I would say it's the most polarizing issue I've ever seen. I mean, at least since Calacanis versus Arrington. I mean, that was the only thing that ever came close to it.
Do you remember when HP was spying on reporters and like going through their trash? Like that was pretty
loathsome.
I remember my old boss, Puing Tang, was the subject of that, and like going through,
crazy.
So we've had a lot of fights and pretty tense battles. But
Silicon Valley doesn't like reporters too much.
All right, let me hetero-explain for a second here. I'm very big in the gay community, as you know, and I want to talk a little bit about the moment in time that all this happened. In seriousness, there was a moment in time where being a gay man would seriously limit your opportunities in the world, or at least a lot of gay men felt that way. Anderson Cooper was a target of outing by Gawker, I believe. Owen Thomas and Nick Denton were out, and they outed Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel didn't like that because he was running a hedge fund at the time, financial services, not super friendly to gay men at the time.
specifically, they're like Saudi LPs, not the
yes,
LPs.
Saudi LPs.
Okay. So that was
might have
it wasn't that investors were okay.
But I would say just having grown up in New York and knowing Wall Street guys, I mean, at least 10 years ago, I would say homophobia pretty high up on the list. Freud can assess why they're so opposed. How much of this has to do with the politics of outing people and the pain associated with that in your mind, Nellie? Because it is, from an outside person
in my life. I have no idea what you're doing.
Well, I'm just saying there's 3 gay men. 2 of 3 are out. 2 of 3 have basically been on a jihad to out everybody possible. Do you think that Owen Thomas and Denton were outing people for political reasons because of
2 things? I think that I don't think that Owen considers this a outing. Thiel was already out within his community. Everyone knew it. He was writing
quietly,
about something.
just the same way Tim Cook.
Yes, but he'd already been a very successful person in Silicon Valley as a gay man, openly. And
no,
he
it
just
was not
wrote
open.
about
It might have been open at a gay party. It was not open amongst.
Open isn't 20 people at your house, right?
Yeah, it wasn't like if you asked 100 people in Silicon Valley.
I see both sides. There are a lot of people.
Well, what's your position on it?
I honestly don't know. I mean, there are a lot of people who think that outing someone is good and outing a public figure is good, and that it reminds young people across America that there are lots of important gay people in the world, like actors and investors and all of that. And then obviously there's personal privacy. The politics of outing are really hard.
Yeah. Jessica, with Tim Cook, if people had known he was gay, been a shoo-in or been as easily placed as CEO of Apple, could that have caused a problem if he didn't take his time to come out amongst people who were investors in the company, in your mind? And I'll have you answer that too, Nellie.
I don't think so, but I also respect his privacy for not wanting to.
Right.
But I don't think if he had wanted to earlier, it would have affected
10 years ago?
Maybe, probably. I mean, a lot's changed.
What do you think, Nellie? I do think that's a fair point. Nellie, 10 years ago, Anderson Cooper, if he was out before he had ascended to the ranks at CNN, or even Peter or Tim Cook, do you think they would have had an easier time in their career or a harder time?
I don't know.
I can answer it.
I mean,
they would have had a much harder time. And I think that's the thing that people are not missing about this whole story. We all look at the world through. Go ahead. What you want to?
Well, for me personally, I've grown up in a bubble. I live in San Francisco. Yes. I lived in New York, and this is all I know about being a queer person.
Right.
I really don't think what Owen wrote was some nasty outing with malicious intent, or even really an outing. I think this man was already a well-known gay person within his community, and this was just he literally ended it with ended this post with he's gay and good for him or something like that, and this is written by a gay guy. It's a celebration. It's a celebration of a leader within the community.
It's an outing,
if anything.
nonetheless.
It was an outing.
It's an outing.
I think you're wrong on this one, because here's the thing: the people in the industry, I was there.
Disingenuous to say
I didn't know Peter.
Positive, so therefore it doesn't have.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, a lot of us didn't know Peter was out. So
what's the threshold? When does it go from being
what percentage? Well, I think the issue is if you're a gay man and when Nellie references the community, if you're out to the gay community, it doesn't mean you're necessarily out to the wider community. And that is the issue, is when you're out to the wider community, then it has massive financial repercussions. And I think this is a case where the 2 people who are fighting, all 3 of them actually, they all are highly imperfect human beings. I'm a much more evolved person than I was 10 years ago. And I look at this as tragic. And I think the tragedy here is how gay men have suffered and had their careers limited. And the divisiveness and the pain of gay men in being the bigotry against them causes these three gay men to get into this epic battle. And we're all looking at it through the lenses of journalism. We're all journalists in free press, or in Jessica's case, they've savaged you. I think because your husband made a lot of money at Facebook. They claim...
Actually savaged us before even there was Facebook connections. But that's not, I mean, it's not savage. It's like 2 mean articles. It's not that.
Okay, well, they savaged me saying
yeah.
I was a racist, which is, when you're from a mixed race family and I have, mixed race children, it's like a little bit rough. Like, not that I care. I mean, I understand what they're doing. They're going for page views at all costs. But the politics of destruction and how gay men suffered in that period of time is so tragic. And you just think about from...
It's interesting to pull this back to the gay issue.
It is, because I think that
I've been thinking about this, and so the journalist mindset. It is interesting. I haven't really
Well, think about it. We all came to it because the three of us are journalists here. 2 of the 3 people here are also publishers. And, we're both targets. So we all have to look at it through our own personal lens. I try to now in my life, as I try to become a little more zen about things, I look at it and I say, gee, what is that person going through at the time? I knew Nick Denton at the time. His mom had died of cancer. He had struggled with his own homosexuality greatly. Owen was an out man here who had a lot of personal problems. I'm not going to get into, but he did have personal problems. And then I look at Peter Thiel, who's a very complex character, who's super right wing, probably had a little bit of self-loathing about his, being a gay man in some way, and did wacky stuff on campus. I just look at all 3 figures as very tragic and very hurt individuals who then lashed out at each other. And the hurt is so deep. When you're outed or when you've suffered through it, I think that people are, they're hurt so deeply. The wound is so deep that they can't let it go.
Yeah.
And if you just think, I think the biggest person at fault is our society for just not accepting gay people for who they are. If gay men were accepted, this whole thing goes away. So we're all looking at it, Nellie, through the lens of, oh my God, am I going to personally get sued? Do I have to worry about this? Jessica's looking at it like, well, listen, Jessica's husband is rich, went to Facebook, she's friends with everybody in this community.
What are you talking about?
Well, whatever. I mean, you're a target because...
Back against,
well, I think you're a target.
Like you're painting me.
No,
I'm looking at it from the point that news organizations should be held to account.
You run a news organization.
Jessica point of view.
You run a news organization, but your husband worked at Facebook. It creates a complication for you.
Sure, but I was a reporter before he worked at Facebook, and it's
Correct.
completely independent of all.
It's independent, except you guys play from the same chip stack, right?
But how does that affect my opinion on this case, which is that a media organization should be held to account? There's defamation, there's libel, there's a legal process, game over.
Absolutely. I think you have integrity, and I think your position is based on that. But you have to still suffer through the fact that people are always going to say in your reporting, she's friends with these people. She's worth millions of dollars because of these companies.
Very few people say that, Jason. You're saying this more than anyone's ever said.
Actually, Jessica, I hear people say it all the time.
I hear
people say it all the time that your publication is funded by Facebook.
Yeah,
now listen, I don't believe that's
funded by me personally, which I've also said a million times. Stop reading Pando Daily.
All right, well listen, I agree that Pando is also on the spectrum of like Gawker at its worst.
And I look actually when family. I'm very lucky.
Listen, I think you're doing tremendous journalism, but this is what they've attacked you for.
Let's move this on before I get quite frustrated and move on. Seriously.
What's the issue? You print disclosures in your publication about it all the time, right?
Yeah, but we'll move on. Next topic.
Well, okay, fine. I mean, if it makes you uncomfortable to talk about, I'm not.
I like you painted that as what I have to bring to the table here and defines me. Which
I apologize if you take it that way. It's not how I intended. Cool. What I'm intending it is, we each have our own lens that we come to this from. And as a publisher who has been savaged about these kind of issues or been beat up or whatever, or I think treated unfairly, you have to then look at it. That has to contribute to how you look at this, I think.
Perhaps.
That's all I'm saying. And so I think that we're all looking at it through our own individual lenses. And then if you step back and you look at the reality of the situation, it's really about 3 gay men in a fight over the politics of outing. Yeah. No outing occurs,
I think
lawsuits.
It's interesting to have this angle of the outing and the gayness being a central part. But I think this has, for me, the really interesting conversation is around the media and journalism in Silicon Valley right now, and like how this space has become so powerful and so important and so wealthy, and the media is still sort of playing catch up in terms of how aggressive it can be. And the people here are still playing catch up in terms of like getting used to the idea that there's going to be an aggressive media. And I actually think Jessica's done incredible reporting, like their Nest scoop. I mean, obviously, you don't need anyone to tell you this, but has obviously done great reporting.
The criticism
about the thin skin. I mean, the tech people here are certainly thin skinned. I think you make a really good point on that, Nellie, too. And it's right to point out like how, I think in your column you said, if they like it, it's great journalism. If they don't like it, it's clickbait, right? It's obviously bullshit. I also think, though, I mean, I've covered the media industries, the telecom industries, and media moguls are also very thin-skinned.
Oh, my God,
right?
are they?
And so the number of phone calls I got, like you mentioned, so I think it's worth putting scrutiny out here. It's this population kind of is different in a lot of different ways, but people are thin-skinned.
Is there not enough investigative journalism here? Are there too many conflicts here? Because you look at something like Theranos, it seems to have festered a bit before it was outed, so to speak, as having all these fundamental problems. We don't really have an aggressive investigative journalism function in society anymore. The investigative journalism...
We certainly don't have it in Silicon Valley, and I think it's a real problem.
And we don't have it here.
I think it's a real problem.
You think it's a problem?
Yeah, I think it's really sad. I think the Theranos example was a great embarrassment for the Silicon Valley press. We've talked about this. Yeah. It was some guy in Brooklyn who did it, John Kerry, and he got the scoop on it. So,
Jessica, what are your thoughts? I mean, are we all... from living here and being, connected in the industry, are we too soft on people?
Some people are, and some people aren't. You just can't make generalizations like that.
Overall, if you look at the whole press corps
compared to what,
here,
right? I mean, the Washington press corps has some people who are tough and has people who are soft. So I'm much more interested in I'm more interested in having a business model and an organization that can support investigative journalism, like the kind of stuff we did on Nest that I really do believe in. The New York Times and Wall Street Journal gave us credit for contributing to his departure from that company. And I think as a news industry across the board, we need to find ways to do a lot more of that. And I think that that's going to come from all different places, right? I mean, the Wall Street Journal is not a Silicon Valley publication, but they kind of are, right? So I'm just pro, stories, no matter where they come from, that look deep and go behind the curtain. And I think... overall, there's a lot less of that, but I don't think are there dynamics here? Yes. Are there people who want to invest in these companies so they don't push hard, or absolutely. But I think that's also just that dynamic happens a lot of other places too, and we'd be best served to come up with the organizations and train the reporters to do those stories than to kind of debate if we're worse off or better off or that kind of thing. Because that's
Nellie,
hard to do.
No? Yes, Braintree. Thank you so much for supporting independent media like This Week in Startups. And when your customers pay, you're going to need to keep their information safe. This is absolutely critical. As you know, you see hacking occurring constantly, and making sure that your customers' payment information and their transactions are safe is critical, and it's critical to Braintree. And that starts with being what's called PCI compliant. That means your business follows the security standards that have been well established now. They're a little bit complicated, but Braintree makes it super easy, and you got to protect your customers from cyber threats and your business from security breaches. As you know, we've seen over and over again, companies can lose it all if they're not PCI compliant and they're not on top of their security game. You need to do a complete self-assessment questionnaire. It's called an SAQ to make sure you're compliant, and Braintree is the payment platform that helps you qualify for the shorter, simpler version of SAQ, the self-assessment questionnaire. So even with new security standards, you're going to be PCI compliant. I want you all to visit BraintreePayments.com/twist. 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 Go ahead and thank @Braintree on your Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, friend feed, Friendster, Pounce, whatever you use for your social media. Go ahead and thank @Braintree for supporting independent media like This Week in Startups that URL again, braintreepayments.com/twist. Thank you so much to our friends at Braintree. They've been such an amazing sponsor and partner of This Week in Startups, even This Week in Startups Australia that Mark Pesce does. Yes, we're doing 20 episodes this year thanks to our friends at Braintree. And I love the product. A lot of my startups use it, and it's so easy to use, and you'll be PCI compliant. Okay, let's get back to this amazing episode. You each were very brave to write about this, and after you write about stuff, God, you each got a lot of feedback on your respective pieces. Nellie, you wrote a piece, which I'm quoted in, about Silicon Valley, what Silicon Valley billionaires don't understand about the First Amendment. I'm quoted in it, which is great, when I say Peter Thiel is a hero, 100% in the right, fighting against this evil. What was the feedback on this piece?
Largely positive.
Positive, largely?
Yeah.
From the media people?
Yeah,
Tech
largely
people,
positive. Tech people, I've been approached by people who disagree with me, or I got a couple emails, but all pretty nuanced, pretty interesting. This has been a divisive issue, but
I noticed,
the response to that was largely positive.
I have I don't know.
Vinod is my favorite to debate about all this stuff.
Well, Vinod
that's what I like him, because he engages.
Vinod does engage.
Yeah.
And he's a complex guy as well.
With the beach thing, he really embraced
the beach thing is so ridiculous.
He really embraced
it's such a
villain sort of.
He's so clueless.
But he's gotten
about the beach thing.
He's got he's got his rationale. You know,
I just sometimes need to talk. I literally have talked to a number of people who are in this class of Vinod Khosla, and I've said to them, "You've won so huge. Why would you do something like this?" Yeah. Well, literally, I've had that. I wouldn't say who, but in the Vinod level.
For the beach, he really believes he's fighting for the rights.
Explain
of the
beach issue.
He bought a beach town, and it had a long time public access road that was sort of popular among surfers, and popular
in the sense of a dozen people a week might go there.
Yeah,
it seems.
But whatever. And California has a long history of public access beaches, and it's very important in our culture and our ethos.
The beach belongs to nobody.
And he cut off the beach, basically. He closed the gate so you can't drive down.
It's not only that, he fought it relentlessly.
Yeah, and he put security guards up there, and then he arrested 5 surfers, so they became the Half Moon Bay 5, or what's the
It's so ridiculous.
He's really it's been like a PR nightmare.
How stupid is this, Jessica? In your mind, when you see a Vinod Khosla case like this, because you wrote a pair of pieces. The first one, Let Silicon Valley Speak.
Yes, which was actually more about the Facebook conservative trending topics.
Okay. And then you did one, Silicon Valley, It's Time to Look in the Mirror. Are these companion pieces in your mind?
Sort of, in part, yes and no, because the first one was also about conservative gate, or whatever we're calling that now. I focused on my writing about why, I'm sort of interested in how people view leaders in the Valley, right? And what the dynamics are. And I think, and the responsibility that this new generation of wealth and power, 6 out of 10 of the Forbes richest people in the world, right, or U.S., that they have, right? And I think that they absolutely, they stick their foot in their mouths. They do a lot of things that are bad. They do a lot of things that are counterproductive to what they actually want to do for the sake of being provocative and not being thoughtful about. For example, when you celebrate self-driving cars, what does that do to employment, right? So I think that there's always been a gap between the rich and the powerful and everyone else. There's a bigger than ever gap now. And I think that, the look in the mirror is, you look in the mirror and figure out what to do, and not just to do in a public image way, but in a genuine way.
When you look at the Vinod Khosla, what's your candid thought on that? I like the fact that you're not afraid to talk about specific cases.
I know, but I just haven't followed this one that closely.
Okay, but
honestly.
as Nellie describes it, is correct. I know because I've watched I've read everything about it.
Is it a dickish move to cut off a beach access? Yes. Could there possibly? I don't.
It's the biggest, stupidest thing you could ever do.
Wait.
You know who did this as well? It was David Geffen did this down in Malibu.
And
they basically forced him to put access next to his house. And then the community started sending busloads of people there from downtown or whatever, and they ruined the beach there for him in his mind.
Ruined the beach for David Gilbert.
Well, it was like
ruined it.
he bought this huge house, and then like literally they made a point of putting 50 people in front of it, so he could he bought it to have like a
sunbathing.
retreat and just sit there and not. He basically
Probably
made it
not even in shape.
He took it from like 2 or 3 people being in front of his beach every day to 200. Right? Like he literally basically stepped in it.
The community outside Vinode's
I
think
hate
that
to burst our little tech bubble here, but rich people the world around do this, right? I'm
of
sure
course.
somewhere in the Hamptons, someone's crying at some gate right now, right? So just to,
and it's not good there either.
I agree. I think
but the
public
one
beach
thing-
access is important.
The one thing for Vinod,
It's just
though,
so dumb. It cost him nothing.
the thing is,
he should have put an ice cream stand up.
He's willing to
below
debate,
market ice
which
cream.
is so rare. He's willing to debate, and he was the only one at the code conference who was willing to go on stage. He wanted to go on stage.
He just couldn't make it.
He couldn't do it for like
scheduling
the
reasons.
Wednesday because he
Here's what
couldn't
Vinod
move
Khosla
Bill
should do.
Gates.
This is a message for Vinod Khosla. Number 1, you've made more money than you could ever spend. Number 2, I'm on the back 9. You're on the back 2. You're not going to be here much longer. No offense. I'm 45. What is he, 65?
What does that mean? The back 9?
When you're on a golf course, the front 9, the back 9. When you say you're on the back 9, it means you're in the second half of life. It's a colloquialism. Anyway, point is, Vinod, you got 3 holes left. Be a mensch. Literally, if it's me and I bought that, you know what I do? I put up an ice cream stand. I give any kid 2-for-1 ice cream. And everything, anybody who wants free access, I put filtered water there and free water bottles.
Yeah.
And
I know.
I donate some money to some charity. Don't be a huge. You don't want to be a huge douche when you've been successful. In success, be magnanimous. This is what I tell people. You've already won. Stop acting like you've lost, Vinod. You won. Be a goddamn mensch. Period.
You saying that to Thiel too?
Well, you know what? I have traded a bunch of emails with Nick Denton. I've traded a bunch of emails with Peter Thiel in the last 2 weeks. And as I told Peter, I'll tell you what I told him. Listen, I back you up on fighting for the rights of people who have, when they've done illegal activities. Don't do 20 of these. Like, let it go. Move on. This is not like you want your legacy to be that you're beating up journalists, because journalists are already being destroyed by market forces.
Yeah.
The only way journalism survives in the future is going to be, listen, look at the two of you, the Guardian Trust and a small paid newsletter that has low thousands of people paying for it. Like, there's the model of open journalism, advertising based with investigative journalism and these huge budgets is ended.
The market will take care
It's
of that.
all, the market, it's exactly the truth. The market has. So you have all these journalists who are already on their heels. They don't need billionaires beating them up on the way down.
For him, though, I think it's part of a philosophical thing. I mean, he's also the Trump delegate. Lest we forget, we haven't talked about that. And Donald Trump has a very clear message for reporters and for the press in general.
That is pretty scary.
And
So actually,
and for
do you
the
think that
principles of
plays
freedom of
into-
speech.
I
So
don't
you
know
tell
if
me.
Peter shares Donald. I mean, he also
He's his delegate.
his views on the media. Nellie.
Okay.
And actually, if any of his views, honestly, I mean,
Well,
some
then
people
why is-
are party people, some people are views people. Honestly, you just don't know. Like, I don't understand why all these people are supporting Donald Trump, but I don't believe that they all agree with him on policy stuff, right? Even
Why
Paul
is
Ryan
Peter,
said
though?
he
Does
a lot
anybody,
of
have you
credit.
talked to
That's giving people a lot of
Do you
credit.
talk to Peter one-on-one personally or no?
I'm not going to talk about that here.
Well, why not?
Because I'm not.
Either you know him or you don't. I mean, do you get quotes from him?
I do know Peter Thiel,
Right,
yes,
okay.
and I do get quotes from him.
Okay, so if you get quotes from him, you talk to him. So when it comes to Peter, do you think that he just votes the party line, or do you think that he actually thinks America? Have you talked to him about this specific issue?
I
Why
have
is
not
that-
talked to him about Trump, no.
I mean, I think that's what we have to get out of Peter. There's a message for Peter Thiel. He has to just explain why he's backing Trump. If he's backing Trump because he backs whoever the Republican lead is, that's understandable. Anybody in whatever
I don't
party.
give anyone that special exception. Well,
Okay,
you're just a Republican.
I understand what
You
your
just
point is
feel
too,
Republican.
yeah.
What do you mean? You feel you're just a Republican philosophically? This is the Republican candidate.
At least
you
it
back
would give
Trump.
us.
You back Trump.
At least it would give
Don't
us.
give me any
some,
nonsense about.
Yeah, I mean, at least it would
nuance
give
with
us
this.
some
No.
understanding, because there are a group of people who believe that once you join the party, whoever wins, you just
And
support.
those people are wrong.
I am actually with you on that, Nellie. I think you have to be a little bit more independent in your thinking and critical thinking. But this is a good story for you. Why don't you email him and just ask him, why is he backing Trump?
Yeah. I don't know.
Why hasn't anybody asked him that?
I bet people have asked him.
Right. Because this is, it does dovetail with the issue that
It could, and if he doesn't speak on it, people will continue to think it does. He also has been a supporter of the Committee to Protect Journalists. So again, I don't say that then it excuses anything from Gawker and being in the shadows on that, but I do think that if you were trying to make the case that he hates journalists just because he supported Donald Trump, I think Donald Trump's comments on journalists are very, very scary. I mean, that's a whole separate
almost
topic.
everything he says is scary.
I
think it's scary
impressed
by design.
what BuzzFeed did this week and Jonah Peretti. And
what happened?
They turned down $1 million from the Republican National Committee because they thought that Trump, their quote was, we don't take ads from cigarette makers and we don't take ads from Donald
Racist?
Trump.
Yeah, I thought that was great.
So
I think that's a pretty interesting position on that. What do you think, Jessica, if Trump was elected, what impact does that have on Silicon Valley? And because you're an insider, what are insiders saying about, and I mean that in a good way, what are Silicon Valley insiders saying about the possibility of Trump? What would that impact would that have on us? Do they believe he'll become a centrist and that all this is a show to get himself ratings?
No, I don't think they believe. I think they're incredibly scared, particularly when it comes to immigration, which is a issue the Valley cares very deeply about. So
and we made very little progress on with even Obama, who was put in office by the tech industry.
So I think there's a lot of fear about that, and I don't think there's the wishful thinking that it'll change his mind. And people believe it could happen, obviously, because it could. So I think it's just a lot of fear, and we'll probably, as we get into the general election, see more policy stuff. People, I think, will drill in more. I think there was a meeting just over the past couple of days with Trump and some congressional leaders about policy stuff as it relates to tech. But I think immigration was not on the agenda there, which frustrated a lot of people.
Well, do you have any insight into what would happen to the public stock market if Trump was elected? Would it be boomtown because people think the regulations would be released, or do people just be scared?
Protectionism is not exactly an engine for economic growth. So I it's very hard to speculate, but I think it's hard to. There's also what he says and what he does. But, Silicon Valley is generally pro-global trade and pro-immigration. So
the World Wide Web is available to all countries except for the dictatorships.
We want our iPhones in every country, that kind of stuff.
It'd be nice if people in China and Mexico could actually pull up Yahoo and Google.com and Facebook.com and Twitter.com.
I think, though, the youth movement around Trump, the sort of alt-right movement around Gamergate, Milo Yiannopoulos, Donald Trump, this kind of
reaction
soup that's been created here. I think it is a Silicon Valley thing, and maybe the CEOs aren't into it, but I think there's a lot of the kind of like the politics. Basically, it's like a message board came to life. It was like what Trump is, and what's this alt-right movement.
That's really interesting.
I don't think that
define
that is
what the alt-right
separate.
movement is. Alt-right movement is because
I shouldn't be defining because I don't know. I actually want to do a story on this on what it is and how it's related to Silicon Valley. Because I think there's something of the message board come to life that we're seeing in Trump, in Milo, in a lot of this Gamergate. It's
the worst of Reddit.
Yeah, a kind of
the worst moments of Reddit.
Some of the simmering bile that is now becoming embodied is fascinating to me. And I don't think that that's separate from Silicon Valley. I think it's woven into the culture of this place. And I think it's why women have had such trouble breaking into it. I think it's why Silicon Valley struggled so much with race. I think these things are all entwined.
There's some...
Not that everyone by any means supports Trump, and by and large it's a liberal place, but this is simmering underneath.
There's something, it's interesting you bring up like this message board culture, and Milo Yiannopoulos, who is, for people who don't know, like a Breitbart contributor. Breitbart is like this ultra right-wing kind of Trump-esque publication. And then there's this whole Facebook sort of piece about the trending topics, where the trending topics were curated. It's interesting because I was doing a lot of curation at the time with Inside. What do you think of that, Nellie, where Facebook had, it seems like, contractors subverting, and paradoxically, this is a Gawker story that they broke. So Gawker doing some good in the world, but some of the contractors, who were low level, obviously, were subverting the Breitbarts and the right wing, which to me makes sense. Like if you were a journalist in New York or I think San Francisco or LA, you'd be like, why would we put up Breitbart or Drudge or these other things?
I mean, you could speak to that probably more intelligently, but my general take on that is the issue is Facebook, we know it's the most powerful publisher in the world, and now it's been revealed that it's also the most powerful editor in the world. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing that they're editing. Like, I think if you just went with the front page of Reddit and had that be your trending topics, that would be a disaster. And so you want some sort of curation in there, and they should just be completely transparent or honest about it. Just like the New York Times is honest that it's an editorial product.
Yeah.
Facebook should be honest that it's becoming an editorial product.
Right. But they didn't have their thumbs on the scale, at least during this experimentation phase, and they got busted.
They're trying to like hide behind like, oh, we're just all being run by machines, but machines are being run by humans.
Correct.
And
what's your take on this whole scandal, the Facebook trending topic scandal?
Well, I think
you guys covered it.
It underscored, the power that Facebook has.
Yeah.
It showed the power Facebook has. I believe like you had one former fired ex-guy who said that this was a systemic problem.
Yep. That's typically how whistleblowing happens is one person.
Yeah, and it could have been a systemic. We've seen no evidence it's a systemic problem, but it could be. Facebook says it's not. It doesn't mean we should believe them. But
right.
I think actually newsfeed should be subject to more scrutiny than the tiny widget in the corner that has 3 links that is trending topics that most people didn't even know existed before.
Facebook should disclose how they're picking what goes onto feeds.
I don't know I think if you just think about the levers they have to influence society, it's the main one. And I think, should Google disclose its search algorithm? Maybe, so I think it's kind of in that reign.
So what do you think of that? Should Google?
No. In that case, I think over time, like they made concessions to antitrust regulators and I trust governments to make those decisions, But I think Facebook has to be similarly kind of cautious and prudent about newsfeed. That's the bulk of what you see, and it's way more important.
Newsrooms hire and fire entire teams depending on what newsfeed wants that.
Well, then in Facebook, Zuckerberg himself got all the right-wing folks to come out to Silicon Valley and Glenn Beck and everybody and said, what was your take on all that, Nellie?
I don't know.
Was it weird?
Trying to comfort them, like I don't.
It was kind of weird. What was your take on that?
Bring out Peter Thiel.
I thought that the coverage, like what Glenn Beck wrote afterwards was pretty weird too. Where he like defended them, and then it sounded like he was almost more interested in like getting tips for how to boost his Facebook likes.
Well, of course. It's like,
anything else.
I tell you, it's like Zuckerberg is using his personality then and his station in life to be like, I will personally meet with you. It was so obvious to me that he was just like, he doesn't want to lose. It's obviously a massively left-wing organization from top to bottom. Like, I know everybody there. You know everybody there. It's all lefty. None of them are. They're all anti-Trump, 100%. Zuckerberg is anti-Trump. Sheryl is
Peter Thiel's on the board. And he's staying on the board.
They're going to let Peter leave on his own accord at some point. They're never going to let the public determine who's on that board. Mark Andreessen said all that stuff about colonialism in India was a stupid statement, right? Jessica, stupid statement?
Very stupid statement.
Nellie, stupid statement from Mark Andreessen?
I forget about our crazy news cycles in this town.
It's a stupid statement.
Yes.
Zuckerberg is not the kind of person, Zuck, we both do, you know him better than I do. Zuck's not the person to react to the public telling him to take Peter or Mark off the board, correct?
Correct.
Right. So in this case, and you would say all the leadership or the top leadership, Sheryl, Zuck, are all anti-Trump, correct?
Correct.
Now, if they're running an organization and you just lauded BuzzFeed for not taking money from the RNC, do you think Zuck and Sheryl would take the same approach and not take money from the RNC?
Absolutely not.
They would take their money.
Absolutely.
So then what's the difference? And then how do you personally feel about this difference?
So I think it's fascinating. I've thought a lot about it this week because...
now we're getting into it.
Yeah, and I'm unfortunately I'm going to jump and leave your awesome
no problem.
show.
After this
we're
one.
running 15 minutes over.
Yeah,
but
no problem.
The business never sleeps. So the thing, and this is what I wrote in first story, like Facebook is so keen. Facebook thinks it has to be a neutral platform to survive, right? So it thinks that it has to be, right? And as we've seen with trending topics, it can't favor certain types of political opinion. It can't favor certain kinds of things.
Right.
But I think what it's sort of translating to is it also can't take a moral stand. It can't take, right? Like there are consequences to that reality, which I think is true. Like I think it does have to be a neutral platform, but it means you haven't seen Mark talk about the presidential election, right? You've barely seen Sheryl talk about it. And I think you would never see them do something like BuzzFeed did, right? And that may just be the reality of the complicated line they have to walk, and they're so big and they're so powerful. But I think it's really kind of interesting that.
Do you think they morally have to take a stand? You said before people have to morally take a stand about this, and it's important. Do you think they need to morally take a stand against Trump?
I don't think on any one issue. Well, I can't think
what
of an
about
issue
immigration?
off the top of the head where.
How about immigration?
Well, and they have taken a stand on immigration,
So,
right?
why wouldn't they come out and say Trump's stance on immigration is abhorrent?
I mean, I don't know why they haven't, right?
I could
and
tell you
Mark
the
did
answer.
have that. I mean, so he had that building walls reference in the F8 keynote, right? Which was sort of, and got heat for that. And then
Yep.
this thing came up. So I think.
So you think he's
muzzled.
cowered? He's cowered away?
Yeah, I do.
You think he's muzzled?
I think himself, self-muzzled, right? I mean,
He self-muzzled himself
and I think.
because of money.
Well, because look at what happened with trending topics. I mean, I think it's a
Because of the
rational
power.
step, right? I think it's
Right.
rational. And
Do you think it's cowardly, Nellie? I'm gonna bring him. Make sure you get left out here. Is it cowardly of Mark Zuckerberg to not take a position on the fact that Trump wants to deport 10 million people?
I think anyone who doesn't. I think we all have to denounce Trump and,
I'm just talking about
all
that
that he
specific
stands
issue. Like,
for.
we
I think
care about
anyone in
immigration.
a position of power and a public figure who does not say that what Trump is fighting for is wrong and racist and an evil force for America. Anyone who doesn't say that, has been cowardly.
Wrong side of history.
One of
Yeah,
the
wrong side
interesting
of
things,
history.
just to tie it back to Jonah, though, right, is so if you look at the sort of bind Facebook as the organization feels of having to be unbiased, right, it actually, to me, reminds me of news organizations, right, which try very hard. And so I think media companies have also tried to walk this line, right? And now tech companies are realizing that they're publishers and their stuff
Hard
too.
to do.
And it is hard to do, but media organizations also have editorial pages, and they also have publishers who do things like Jonah did. And so in this case, actually, it feels like the tech companies are more skittish than even the media companies. And
I have to
think
say,
that's interesting.
Mark Zuckerberg is an absolute embarrassment. And I'm very disappointed in Sheryl Sandberg for not taking a stance against specific issues against Trump.
Well, I think there's a long line.
Do you feel
of
like
people who are
Larry
supposed to
Page
be-
is the same?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
Bill
If you do
Gates?
not,
There's a
if you do
big
not,
list of people. Like Bill Gates was
Absolutely.
asked to Trump questions. He's
I'll go
not
down the
saying
list,
anything
but let me
either.
start
So
with Mark
it's-
Zuckerberg. Let me start with Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl. Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl have fought for immigration in this country, and they have a mandate of connecting the world. Trump's position on immigration is abhorrent, and it is the antithesis of everything that Mark claims Facebook is about, and Sheryl claims Facebook is about, connecting the world. It is an anti-connection position to want to deport 10 million people who have worked tirelessly to build a better future for their families. For Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg, there's a message to them to not specifically go against Trump in this is cowardice. It's cowardice in the face of absolute evil, and it is disgusting that they will not take a position because the technology industry and the internet was supposed to be different. We were supposed to promote freedom on a global basis. And here is your perfect moment for Zuckerberg to put up or shut up and say, hey, I believe that Trump is wrong on this issue. I'm not anti-conservative. It is an open platform. I personally believe it's wrong to deport people. I believe we should have a more open world. Zuckerberg wants to be out there saying he wants a more open world. He believes that Facebook is a force for good. Then be a goddamn leader. Sheryl wants to say that. Be a leader. You know what? It's greed. They won't say it because it will affect their pocketbooks. It has to do with money, and it shows you exactly where the leadership of Facebook stands. Am I wrong or right, Jessica?
I'm going to leave it to you, Jason.
You agree with me.
That was a great ode.
Yeah, you got to go.
And
I know.
I'm
But
going to
you agree
bounce.
with
But
me, I
thanks
think.
for having me
Okay.
on the show.
Okay, Jessica. Nellie, we'll continue a little bit here.
No, I'm going to sneak out.
Okay, we'll wrap up the show. Listen, this has been an amazing episode. Thank you again to Jessica Lessin for being with us, perhaps for the last time. the editor-in-chief of
Kelly
TheInformation.
Candace.
Did she seem like she was upset?
You were mean to her.
Why? When I said that she has a conflict. I have a conflict with Uber.
It's not a conflict. Everyone has a conflict with everything.
Well, then
Come
you have
on.
to disclose the conflict.
Yes, you disclose it, but she doesn't need to prove herself as a reporter. She's like,
Well, I do say that.
fantastic.
Okay, I want to listen to you.
I thought that was.
I'll listen to the tape. When I said
that.
that she has her wealth comes from Facebook, it actually she has to explain every time she covers Facebook this issue that she
having that be her like one-line definer is unfair.
What my point there is, we all have conflicts, and so we are been beat up about our conflicts. Like I'm getting beat up about what Uber does constantly.
Yeah. I think that was.
I'll have to have enough. I didn't mean to put her on the spot, but I do think that the whole discussion here is how conflicted we all are.
Yeah. She's the thing that Jessica is
sensitive about this issue.
No, she's a great reporter.
I love TheInformation. I'm a huge fan.
And she's honest. She's inside this. Like one of the things you do when you subscribe to TheInformation is you're subscribing to a thing where you know, like, okay, Jessica can have lunch with Mark Zuckerberg and probably does at any given day. I can't have lunch with Mark Zuckerberg, so you pay for the knowledge that you're getting whatever he said that week, like because you know that she knows these guys, and so I don't know. I like what she's doing. I'm a big fan.
She has tons of integrity.
I'm a big.
She has tons of integrity. I am a huge fan as well. That's why I have her on the show every chance I get. But the issue of the personal destruction of the destructive journalism that Gawker was doing, attacking her about the conflicts, attacking me. I get attacked about conflicts. You have to be able to talk about that. The fact that Jessica is like offended to talk about that.
Well,
I mean, am I not supposed to bring it up?
Of course you can bring it up, but come on.
Well, I think her position on Facebook, I mean, the whole industry is coming to a point here. And I think the end discussion here, when I was talking about Zuckerberg and Sheryl and all this stuff, is the industry has to make a decision if it wants to stand against evil in the world and about things that are bad positions. And I think that, if you're not willing to discuss it, that speaks volumes.
That point about Zuck, I think, is smart and is right. And yes, but I think you should also call on every CEO in America.
I will, absolutely.
Like, I don't think that's just a Zuckerberg's responsibility, although he has an inordinate amount of power. Yeah. But I think anyone, my uncle, my sister, everyone should announce what Trump is doing. It's
I don't know
about you. My entire family is like a Trumpkin, so I'm like surrounded by.
You don't have to be anti-Trump. You can just discuss the specific issues. I think being anti any person isn't constructive.
I'm anti that person.
You could be. I understand that, but I like to look at the specific issues that they're promoting. Number one, they're promoting deportation of 10 million people, and they're promoting. You just have to take people on what they say. If he says he wants to demote 10 million people, and our industry says we want to open the borders, and Facebook and Zuckerberg says he wants to open up the world, then how does he not come out against that?
Yeah.
That to me seems weird. Anyway.
Jason, I love you so much, but we got to
go.
Here.
Okay, here we go. We're wrapping up. Thank you to Nellie Bowles, staff writer at The Guardian, and thank you again to Jessica Lessin. I'll have to have a debrief with her after this episode on TheInformation. Obviously, I don't want to make anybody feel uncomfortable. I'm sorry if that happens, but
Jason Gallagher never makes anyone uncomfortable.
This is a tough discussion. The Peter Thiel discussion, very hard, and the Facebook thumb on the scale with the conservative stuff, very hard. Immigration, we're talking about the hardest issues. Yeah. And talking about the hard issues is hard. I get it. It's hard. And you know what? We're all conflicted. Listen, if we bring up Uber, I constantly have to bring up my conflict. It's 99% of my net worth. And
mine too.
Yours too, obviously.
Obviously, just
whatever it happens to be. But I have to do that for her and her family. Like a large percentage of their net worth is going to be based upon Facebook. So when she covers Facebook, you have to understand that.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
I'm getting out of here.
Okay. We'll see you next time on This Week in Startups. Bye-bye.